Have you ever watched BookTube where there's these book content creators and they basically do these reading vlogs where they sit down and they read a bunch of books in a very short amount of time and then give super quick reviews, and it's kind of like vlog style, so you get to see them reading as well. I have, and I love that kind of content. I love watching book vlogs, and I really wanted to do one on this channel. So I went to the thrift store. I thrifted a bunch of occult books, and I also gathered a bunch of books that have just been sitting on my shelf that I've been meaning to read forever. I have hit a point where I cannot allow myself to buy any more books until I finish reading all of the ones that I have at home on my shelf. So that is what I'm attempting to do with this vlog. I don't know how long this vlog is gonna go, if I'm just gonna do a 48-hour reading period and then see how many books I can get through in that amount of time. I may extend this and do like a full 7-day readathon where I'm just reading as much as I can over the course of an entire week. So I have 16 books in front of me right now that I want to bulldoze my way through. I have a couple different reading styles when I read books, so I'm not going to be doing a deep read where I heavily annotate the book, I do all of the exercises, I go really slow. That's not really the type of read that I'm doing. What I'm really going to do is a quick read, which is where I still read the entire book, but I kind of decide whether it's a book that I want to go back and slowly deep read, annotate, do all the exercises, etc. Because I don't want my time wasted. So I usually do a quick read before I do a deep read. So let me introduce you really quickly to all 16 books. And then what I'm thinking is I will put the titles of the books in a bowl and I will just randomly draw out the book and I will let the universe tell me in what order I should read these books. I have some thoughts about some of these books already, and I'm really hoping that some of these I'm like, why did I even buy them? Because I already know that I'm gonna have a certain type of feeling about it. Anyways, so the first book here is called Real Magic. This is by Isaac Bonewits. I've heard that he's a staple. I've never read anything from this author. By the way, I'm going into all of these books completely blind. I don't know anything about the authors or the books themselves. Actually, that's not true. There are some books that I do know about the authors. But what really drew me into this book is that it talks about yellow magic, which I've never even heard before. So the author discusses that real magic is neither white or black, but occurs in a rainbow of living colors. Red to rule the body, yellow to govern the mind and the nervous system, blue to influence the emotions, and purple to dominate passion. The next one is called This Tree Grows Out of Hell, and I basically picked it up exactly for that title. It just sounded so interesting. It's about Mesoamerica and the search for the magical body. And I've heard of this author before. I'm not super familiar with Mesoamerican practices. There you go, now you can see the author. So I'm really excited to learn more. This book talks about sacrificial victims usually met their abrupt end in Aztec cities, while the Maya appear to have indulged in gruesome and protracted tortures of their captives. The Aztecs were interested primarily in the instant death and the mental attitude that captive and killer adopted in the charged moments leading up to an instant. So it talks about how victims would line up on Aztec festival days. This book is going to be really difficult for me to read. I'm usually a little bit more sensitive to stuff like that, so I'm really curious to see how this affects my psyche after reading it. The next one I have is called A Dark Muse. So this is by Gary Lockman, and it is a history of the occult. I've said many times on this channel, I'm not a history person. I hate history, but I do think it's so important. And I'm always looking for good occult history books because I find that I tend to be really picky and I struggle to find good ones. I'm hoping that this is not the first book that I draw to read though, because I am currently reading Grimoires, A History of Magic books by Owen Davies. In my book club right now, that's what we're reading. So I'm already reading a history book, and actually I probably need to do this week's reading before I read any of these books. So I'm kind of hoping that this is not the first one I pick, because reading two history books side by side, that's gonna be a little much for me. Then I have The Witch's Compass. I've had this one on my bookshelf for a really long time and I've been meaning to read it, so it is time. But it's working with the winds and traditional witchcraft, and this is by Ian Chambers. So it says, explore the compass of the 8 winds, a magical circle at the heart of traditional witchcraft. Could always use a little bit of traditional witchcraft in my life, of course. This next book was sent to me from a publisher a long time ago, and I didn't even know that they were sending it to me. It just arrived in my PO box and I had no collaboration scheduled with them or anything, but I'm finally getting around to reading this. They had sent me an advanced reading copy, but I never heard from the publisher, so I didn't know if we were doing a collab or what, but this one is called New Moon Magic, 13 Anti-Capitalist Tools for Resistance and Re-Enchantment. This is from Risa Dickens and Amy Torok. So this has been sitting on my shelf because somebody gifted it to me, and it's time for me to sit down and read this book. I think it goes into all 13 moons of the year, so I'm interested to read about that. Next is Cyber Magic. So this is a book by Peter J. Carroll. I've read a lot of Peter Carroll books. I've read Liber Null and Psychonaut, the Apophthegm. I've also read Liber Chaos. So 3 of his other books. I have not read Cyber Magic yet though. And I know, Chaos magicians watching this are gonna be like, what? You haven't read Cyber Magic yet? Yes, I know. It's been on my list for a really long time. I've been meaning to read it. Apparently it goes into advanced ideas in chaos magic, so I'm curious to know how this book differs from his other 3 books that I've read. This next one I just picked up from the thrift store. It's called The Queen of the Night, and I'm really excited about this one. I haven't even taken the tag off yet. This is exploring the astrological moon. So this entire book is just talking about the moon as the Queen of the Night. Queen of the Night explores the hidden depths within the astrological moon, known as the gatekeeper of the unconscious mind, and it examines the reawakening of the moon goddess through the growth of interest in ecological matters and human potential, and the initiatory descent into the magical underworld. I'm so excited to read an entire book just dedicated to the moon. Okay, you guys, I picked up this book called Unicorn Magic from the thrift store. I have no idea what to expect. I don't know. I know nothing about unicorn magic. I mean, dragons and gnomes, sure, but unicorns, definitely not. So it says, awaken to mystical energy and embrace your personal power. And this is by Tess Whitehurst. I have actually read another book by Tess. It was a tree magic book. It was all right. It was pretty decent. I will say it wasn't my favorite. I have a lot of tree magic books, and I have a couple other books that I would prefer over that tree magic book. So I have no idea what to expect with a book like this, but I'm an open-minded person, you know, teach me something new. I was also gifted this book. So this is called The Magical Household, Spells and Rituals for the Home. It looks like this is a rebinding of one of Scott Cunningham's books. I've read other books by Scott Cunningham. I just haven't specifically read The Magical Household. Probably time that I sit down and read this. Next is The Witch's Sabbath. I'm so excited to read this one. This is by Keldon. It's an exploration of history, folklore, and modern practice. So I'm really excited because this has gotten such good reviews by so many people. I'm assuming the book is obviously going to talk about the Sabbath in the terms of not necessarily the wheel of the year, but the Sabbath that you do on the astral realm in Spirit Flight. So I'm hoping that this book talks a lot about Spirit Flight. I don't really know. Again, I did zero research. I have no idea what's in this book. Okay, last couple books that I have are a little bit more spiritual in nature and not necessarily occult related, but I do try to well-round my occult practice by reading books that aren't necessarily about magic. I think that's so important. So this book is called I Will Not Die, An Unlived Life. And this book is all about reclaiming Purpose and Passion by Donna Markova. I was originally drawn to this book simply for the lotus on the cover. The lotus has exceptional personal symbolism to me. It's something I have tattooed on my body. A little bit more self-help and psychology and spirituality mixed together, but this next book is a book that I've been meaning to read for so long. It's called Illusions, and this is by Richard Bach. This book is considered somewhat of a classic to a lot of people that are into esoteric traditions, that I know of at least. My grandma, who was a part of a secret order, this is the one book that she recommended to me that I should read, and I haven't read it yet. It's been sitting on my shelf and I keep meaning to read it. I don't think it has anything to do with magic and mysticism, but I think it's supposed to be trippy from a reality sense. I don't really know. I have no idea what to expect. I know a lot of people really love this book though, and I just haven't read it yet. Last book, we've got a lot here. This one's called The Light of Sex. It is Initiation, Magic, and Sacrament, and it is supposed to be about the tenets of revolutionary religious system conceived by Maria de Nagloska. She was a Russian mystic, occultist, esoteric high priestess, rumored lover of Julius Evola, and self-styled satanic woman of the 1930s in Paris. I know nothing about this woman, but it sounded fascinating, so Initiation, Magic, and Sacrament, let's read about it and figure out who this Russian mystic and occultist was. So I have put all the names of the books in this little cup here, and I'm going to magically draw one out, and that is going to be the first one that I read. Please do not give me, let me stir these up a little bit. Please do not give me a history book as my first one that I draw. I will be so sad if I have to start this marathon off with a history book. Okay, feeling the energy, feeling the energy. A bunch of these are gonna come out as I grab it. Okay, let's see what it is. Okay, it is I Will Not Die, An Unlived Life. I keep messing up the title. I didn't really want to start with this book, but the universe told me that I needed to start with this book. So okay, universe, I'm not really happy with this selection because there are other books that I really, really wanted to read first. But I chose this. I chose to put them all in a bowl and pick them out randomly. So, all right, okay, all right, universe, here we go. Let's read this book. Look at this sweet little note written inside the book. Oh, I love finding stuff like that. 3 chapters in, and I have to say this book immediately pulls you in. The very first chapter, she starts talking about her father's death. It introduces this poem called I Will Not Die, An Unlived Life. I teared up a little bit reading the first chapter, so it really does pull you in pretty deeply. Even though this is technically not really an occult magic book, I can already tell that this is going to be a great book for anybody that's looking for spiritual healing. One thing that I found was really interesting in chapter 3, and the reason why I picked up my camera is because at the very beginning of chapter 3 it says, we all have islands of fear inside us, but we all also have continents of wisdom and truth. And I got to thinking about my mind palace. If you're interested in what a mind palace is or any sort of inner temple work, I'll link my video below for that. But I was thinking about how I organize my thoughts and just the inner, mechanisms of my mind. And I love the idea of isolating fears to an island. If you think about your mind as this entire world and you have these entire huge continents of wisdom, and then taking your fears and then isolating them to a tiny island so they have very limited resources to grow. This has nothing to do with what the author is talking about, but I just really liked that sentence, and it got me thinking about all of the astral work that I could do, all of the shadow work that I could do around my fears and my limitations just by isolating them that way. So that is mainly why I had to pick up my camera, but it's starting off strong. I really like it so far. Quarter book update. I'm about a quarter of the way through this book, and you guys, this is not how I thought this reading vlog was gonna start off. This is a heavy hitter for sure. The author is a psychologist, or I think that she has a PhD. She also has leukemia. I think she's 81 years old now. I just Googled her, and so she's 81. Not at the time she wrote this book, of course, but in 2024. And it's reading very much like a story about someone's life. So if that is not your thing, you're probably not gonna like this book. A lot of self-help books I find are a little bit more like a dictionary. You're reading through, you're learning all these definitions, maybe not a dictionary, but it's a little bit more educational. Whereas this book is very much inspirational. So you get little snippets of this woman's life. There's a lot of poetry and a lot of hard-hitting quotes throughout the book that I really think would take some time to really sit with and digest. There's also a lot of prompts in here, a lot of questions that you can ask yourself that can maybe lead into some shadow work. This book is not on shadow work though. People misunderstand what shadow work actually is. So I'm not suggesting that this is a book on shadow work, but I'm suggesting that a lot of the prompts in here can help lead you through some shadow workings. So yeah, it's hitting my heart a little bit. It's hitting my soul, but that is the update. Halfway through the book. I think this book is hitting me harder than it would hit a lot of people, because watching, can't even get the words out. Watching my own mother go through cancer, and trigger word, cancer. If you have some unhealed trauma around that, you're gonna struggle. You're gonna struggle with this book a lot. I decided I'm taking a quick little break from the book. I'm gonna have some lunch. I'm going to watch some YouTube, and then I will come back to the book in maybe a couple hours. I think I need to digest everything that I read so far. Here we are, had my lunch, wiped my tears, going back into this book. Wish me luck. 3/4 update. I'm just laughing at this point because of how, why? This book would be so great for anybody that really wants to reframe their perspective on death. It's not necessarily a book on how to cope with death. It's not really, if I think of a traditional death book, that I would recommend to people, this is not the one that would come to mind, but it does really inspire you to take your life and live it as passionately as possible. Did it. I finished I finished the book. So final thoughts, I wanted to kind of wrap this up after I've had some time to like wipe my tears away. So final thoughts, I thought that this was a really great book. What I will say is that there's a lot of triggering stuff in here. Triggering as far as death, sexual abuse, war, you know, things like that. So if you're not in a place to handle that, don't read this book. Also, the way it's written in the way of telling a story about someone's life, and you're getting snapshots of her life, which I personally find interesting and I enjoy that format. However, if you don't enjoy reading about other people's lives, you probably won't like this book very much. But I would still encourage anyone to pick this up and read it. I think this is just such a great book for someone's spiritual journey. It brought up so much stuff for me that I did not realize that I was still holding on to, and reconnecting to your passion and really finding purpose to live your best, most unforgettable life before you die, and really doing all the things that you want to do and finding even what your purpose is. Yeah, this was a really good book. So I'm happy I started with this. It was rough, but you know, the universe has a reason, I suppose. So, all right, let's pick our next book. So help me gods, please, please give me something really chill, because I need something that is not heart heavy by any means. Just give me a nice, easy book. All right, here we go. Are you kidding me? This tree grows out of hell. Are you kidding me? So great, I'm gonna go read about human sacrifice now. So I guess we're gonna move on from reading an extremely triggering book for me, for my mental health, and straight into this tree grows out of hell. And so let's read about human sacrifice with the Aztecs. What was I doing with this book selection? Like, I did not think this through very well at all. So, all right, let's learn about the Mayans and the Aztecs. Not quite the order I was hoping for, you know, but we're here. Let's see, when was this book even written? This author sounds so familiar, and I can't remember if this is a controversial author or not. It potentially is, but it's not ringing any bells for me. And again, like I said, I'm going into all of this blind, so I'm gonna have to do some research afterwards. But let's see when this was actually written. So it looks like this is a 90s book. I actually thought it was a little bit older than that, but it looks like this is from 1990. It looked a little bit like 80s font to me, so that's what I was thinking, but 1990, that definitely makes sense. The lighting is going to be strange for a little bit because the sun is setting, but I wanted to say something that I immediately like about this book in the prologue. So I looked up the author, by the way, and I can't find any major controversy about the author. I don't know what I was thinking of, so if anybody's familiar, please let me know. What I really liked about this prologue, I'm going to read it to you because this is a problem that I have come across as well. So, books on Mesoamerican religion tend to either be alarmingly complex or suspiciously simple, depending on whether the writer is impelled to stick to the known facts or to yield to the temptations of imagination, letting it take over where the wreckage of the data proves insufficient to make a good story. So I like that. I like that he immediately addresses the issue that there are some people that write about Mesoamerican religions or just cultural practices, and they end up embellishing it to make it a better story. Little over a quarter of the way through the book now, and my partner is mowing outside, so I'm sorry if you could hear that, but this is exactly what I was talking about in the blood magic video that I just did, I think a couple weeks ago or something like that, how important blood was to the Mayan people. Blood for the Maya was by all indications a supremely potent substance. It was in many ways the currency of the spirit world made manifest. Royal blood, ritually drawn, contained a tremendous amount of energy, so much that its collection in the pictured basket could rend the membrane between worlds in the same way that a magnifying glass held over the surface of a brittle leaf on a sunny day would bring a sudden smoking hole into being. Blood was so sacred. This book really discusses how they viewed blood as a life force. And so, like I was saying in the blood magic video, there is this component of sacrifice, of a renewal of energy working with blood. The practice of bloodletting was absolutely a religious experience. Halfway through the book, and I have some thoughts. I really am enjoying it so far. I thought that this was going to be way more of a difficult read than it actually is. I mean, it gets pretty gruesome, I'm not going to lie, but I thought it was going to be way more gruesome and just really cringy and difficult for me, but I'm actually really enjoying this read. I also like all the notes that the author provides as well. So I'll show you in the back of the book, there is a whole section, because I'm always really skeptical about books like this because I always wonder, how well is this researched? It's hard to find credible sources on this subject. So there's a whole notes section at the back of the book where the author goes over so much analysis. And then after the notes section, there is a big chunky bibliography. So you can see all of the sources. And then at the end of that, you also have a whole index to work with, which is really nice. So it seems like the author really did their research. I looked at some of the sources on the bibliography as well, and it looks pretty legitimate. So again, I'm not super familiar with this author, but it does seem really promising. I hope that nobody comments on this video telling me that this author is actually terrible, but please let me know. So I kept going back and forth between, I was really oscillating between these two positions of, oh, this is getting really intense and brutal, to, oh, this, you know, this isn't too bad. So anytime that I felt like it was getting almost too intense or too brutal, it would kind of take a step back and talk about a couple other things in relation to their culture. So I don't know, it wasn't as brutal as I thought it was going to be, but there were a lot of brutal pieces to it for sure. Dare I say I liked it? I think I did like it. I mean, you have to keep in mind that this was written in 1990. So keep that in mind when you're reading the book, obviously. I don't think this book is for everybody. I really don't. I think it's really going to be only for the select people that are actually interested in this topic and that are not going to be triggered by this kind of stuff. I think I liked it. Would I read this book again and do a deep dive into it? Maybe. Would I recommend this to somebody else? Yes, for the right person. But it was weird. It was strange, it was weird, but I kind of liked that it was weird and strange. I don't know. So I don't think I can read a third book today because I do not have the time. It is getting into the evening now and I have to cook dinner. I still have to do my homework that I've been avoiding, but let's go ahead and pick the third book and then I will get started on that tomorrow. Give me like a fun, you know, universe, give me a fun book because those two were pretty intense to read back to back. It's a little bit later into the evening now. Give me unicorn magic. Oops, let's see what this one is. Real magic. Okay, so yeah, I can read that one next. So this is the one that I was talking about that breaks up magic into red to rule the body, yellow to govern the mind and the nervous system, blue to influence emotions, and purple to dominate passion. So this book is the one written in 1989. I always like to know what year the books are written in because that gives me so much more context when I'm actually reading the content inside. And you can tell by the font. You can tell this is an 80s, 90s book. They're usually my favorite. Whenever I go to the thrift store, I'm always looking for font like this because it usually means it's gonna be a good book. Maybe I'm biased, but I really like the books from the 80s and 90s. Don't let me down, Real Magic. We'll see. It is a new day and I'm about 53 pages through this book. I have so many thoughts, so I really wanted to kind of share some of it with you because, man, I have a lot of thoughts about this book. So I made the mistake of going online and reading a couple reviews about this book, which I should not have done. I really should have just read the book blind. That way I could get a general sense of my own thoughts and feelings first, but it was so polarizing. Reading the reviews on this book, some people love this book and then some people absolutely despise it and talk about how this author is extremely egotistical. And after reading a quarter of the book, I see why. I see why it is so polarizing. I personally am really enjoying the book. However, I can see why someone would hate it. First of all, I was actually wrong. This book was actually written in 1971, so that dates it back even further. I mean, we're looking at a book now that is over 50 years old. So a lot of the scientific knowledge or the scientific ideas presented in this book are very much outdated. It also talks about a lot of conversations that were happening in the occult community at the time that are really no longer applicable. So just some of the ideas and some of the conversations are very outdated, but I personally really enjoy reading older books so I can see what those conversations were and how things have developed over time as far as what people are thinking and feeling. I can see how some people would think that his tone comes across very egotistical. This guy is a hardcore atheist, okay? He is, I actually enjoy his tone because he has very strong opinions, and I am so tired of reading books where people are too scared to share their actual opinions. This guy goes off, okay? He has very firm opinions. I love that. I love passionate people. Tell me why you're passionate about something and tell me why you have a strong opinion. Even if it's completely different than my own opinion, I love listening to stuff like that. I will say he does kind of go on tangents where I'm thinking to myself, where did you even get this idea? Who's saying this? Who are you mad at right now? And it just goes to show that there were conversations most likely happening in the occult community at the time that are not relevant relevant today at all. So I feel like I've lost a lot of context sometimes. One thing I really do love about this book is in the preface, the author really discusses how his own work is outdated. And he talks about, as an author, it's a really difficult thing to do. When you write a book, that book gets set in stone. It is written, it is out there for the public to read for generations to come, and there's really no way to update that work. I mean, you can write an updated version later on, but it's out there forever. And he acknowledges in the preface that he even feels like some of his language is outdated, speaking as a man in the 1970s, but you know, I get why people hate it. Wow. I have to read you this piece. Okay, for how offensive this book has been so far with some of his statements, there is this one piece in here that I think he's actually incredibly maybe ahead of his time for 1971. Okay, let me just read this section to you. So I'm finally getting to the part where he discusses black magic, white magic, and living in color. He says, the black guy wears a black hat and the good guy is riding a white horse. This is the general level of intellect employed when the subjects of black magic and white magic come up. If you have read very closely between the lines, you might have gotten an idea that I don't care too much for either group. You're right. My disgust with the entire concept stems from study and personal experience. I have examined the principles and practices of both sides without finding any moral superiority on either hand. Also, I have belonged to and work with groups calling themselves black and those calling themselves white, and I was totally unable to find any real or important differences in their day-to-day activities. And then he goes on to say, the whole idea of white as good and black as evil is purely the result of cultural bigotries. For example, if you were to walk into a room that was airtight and without a single source of light, you would find yourself blind and helpless. But what would happen if in that same room you were to have its walls and ceilings covered with thousands of 100-watt light bulbs and you were able to walk in? You would also find yourself blind and helpless. I really loved that distinction because he's so right. If you're standing in a black room, you're going to be blind and helpless. If you're standing in a bright white room, you're also going to be blind and helpless. His level of disgust carries throughout everything I'm reading in this book, and I'm so here for it. This guy is cracking me up. Since we've tossed out black and white magic, we can hardly have gray magic. So why not get rid of this whole achromatic, moralistic, bigoted, anti-life scheme of classification of magical acts and organizations? I love this. I unironically love how angry he is. Oh my gosh, the personality in this book is unmatched. Okay, I'm on page 176. Oh my god, you guys. I feel like everybody just needs to read this book just for the funnies. Okay, so he's talking about, what chapter is this? Hold on. So it's a chapter where he's talking about the fundamental patterns of ritual, and he's talking about the placebo effect and spell work and how things work. Anyways, so there's this part in the book where he the amount of exclamation points from this man. So he's talking about how whether he cured the patient or whether his friend cured the patient or whatever, I haven't the slightest idea yet, exclamation point. But these two patients are still alive when they were supposed to be dead a year ago, exclamation point. And one of them lives 400 miles away and hasn't the slightest idea that I am doing anything. 3 exclamation points. I have never seen that many exclamation points in a book that close together, so I'm sad to shame. Okay, you guys, listen. I'm not saying that I agree with everything this man says, because I absolutely do not, and I feel like a lot of the information is outdated, but this book was so interesting and fun to read. I would maybe give this book, like if I had to rate it on a 5-star scale, I would probably rate it at 3 stars, mainly because I'm so conflicted with this book in particular. Do I think that this book is a staple? No, I don't. I disagree with people who would say it's a staple. I understand why somebody might think that, but I feel that this book is not necessary to read to build a really strong foundation for an occult practice because it's so outdated. So I don't personally think it's a staple. There are some other books that are just as old, if not older, that I would consider staples because they do the information and it still applies today. And I just didn't really feel that from this book. I felt like there are other books that were better to build a foundational practice. There was a lot of scientific jargon, so if you do not enjoy that, you definitely don't want to pick up this book because there will be a lot of scientific stuff in it. But it was curious to see the conversations that were happening during that time. So ultimately, if you're bored, read it, but I wouldn't really go out of my way. Like, I wouldn't say this is like a 4 or a 5-star book. It's amazing, you gotta pick it up type of thing. Let's pick our next book. I have some time over the next couple days to do a little bit more reading because I just finished a huge presentation today. I really want Unicorn Magic. I really want to read, oop, one just fell out. One just fell out of here without me even drawing it. So I think we're gonna go with this, but please be Unicorn Magic because I want to read that book so bad. Okay, we're gonna read The Magical Household next. I wasn't really, like I said, I was gifted this book and I wasn't like super interested in reading it, but it's on my shelf and I already have it, so I might as well. So this one is The Magical Household, Spells and Rituals for the Home. This one is by Scott Cunningham and David Harrington. So I'm assuming this one's gonna be a super quick read for me because A, look how skinny it is. B, usually Scott Cunningham is a pretty quick read, for me at least. I really enjoy Scott Cunningham's writing style. And if there's spells and rituals in here, that will make this a lot quicker of a read. So maybe I can knock out this book today too. We'll see. Y'all, this book is so sweet. It's so sweet. I definitely finished it a lot quicker than I thought I would, but I forget how much I love Scott Cunningham, seriously. When I read his books again, it just brings me back to when I read his books, like, I don't know, 20 years ago or 10, I don't know, 15 years ago, however long ago it was. It just brings me right back to that place in my life, and I just adore his writing style. I really do. I grabbed some of his other books that I have just in case, if you aren't familiar with him. I have so many of his books. So I have the complete book of Incense, Oils, and Brews. I have the Encyclopedia of Crystal, Gem, and Metal Magic. I also have Wicca in the Kitchen. I also have Earth Power, and I have Earth, Air, Fire, and Water. I love these two books so much. These are probably my favorites by him that go into a little bit of elemental magic, but The Magical Household was so sweet. I think that anybody who is a witch that focuses on folk magic or hearthcraft or even kitchen witchery would really, really enjoy this book. It was just like falling into a fairy tale, you know? When you open this book, it starts off strong and you're falling into this magical land of folklore, and it's just so cozy. So if you want a cozy little witchcraft book, definitely pick this one up. I'm assuming a lot of witches that have that are watching my videos have probably already read this. I don't know why this is the one book of his that I had not read yet, but I don't know. I think I might actually put it above, like, Earth Power and Earth, Air, Fire, Water is definitely my tops by him. This one might be my second favorite. I don't know. I'd have to reread these other ones, Wicca in the Kitchen, Crystal, Gem, and Metal Magic, and then Incense, Oils, and Brews. I think maybe because these three books are specialties, maybe that's why they're not as much of a favorite, but yeah, definitely these three by him are now my favorites. So that was sweet. That was such a wonderful little surprise universe. Thank you for that. Can I fit in one more book today? I don't think so, but let's go ahead and draw. Next book is going to be Illusions. Okay, so Illusions is the one that my grandma had recommended. So for those that don't know, my grandma was a Rosicrucian. She was in a secret order. I don't know anything that she did. All I know is that she wanted me to read this book, and I just haven't yet. It looks like another really thin and quick one, so no idea what to expect, but we'll see what grandma has to say.